love this place!
Well, what are the D&D images that you guys find most memorable? The most inspirational, the most iconic? I think in some cases it comes down to the era that we're talking about. But I think we'd all agree that early D&D, and in that I include the basic set, the expert set, and first edition, they probably contain the highest number of memorable, iconic pieces of art. Ones that set the tone for the game, that kind of helped give it its legacy that has carried through almost 50 years now. It was a much less fragmented world back then, after all, so I think there was more of a shared experience and kind of bonding around this type of artwork. And it probably led to a little bit more attachment to some of these beautiful images I'm about to show you. Now, obviously, this is just one man's opinion, and not everyone's going to agree, but I'm going to give you my top 20 early D&D art pieces. I may do a follow-up video focusing on art in later editions of the game, so if you happen to appreciate this kind of content, make sure to hit that like button so YouTube would recommend it. Also, drop me a comment on where you think I got it right, and I'm sure you'll let me know where I missed the mark. So without further ado, here are my top 20 iconic images in early D&D. All right, this is the cover of the Fiend Folio. It was a British list of new monsters you were able to use for D&D. That is, if you had already worked your way through the first monster manual. It was originally slated to be published by GW, the folks who do Warhammer 40k, as they were the rights holders to publish D&D content across the pond at the time. But due to one of the many legal entanglements the TSR always seemed to get involved in back then, TSR themselves ended up publishing that book in 1981. Now, some people loved it, some not so much. Ed Greenwood famously panned it in a Dragon magazine review back in the day. Now, as far as us kids who were playing back then, I personally always thought the book was kind of cool. Yeah, it had some silly things in it, but it had some really, really cool things. And that cover is just amazing. The cover art was done by Emmanuel. No, not that one. And it is simply beautiful. And everything I like about D&D art. It's colorful, it's bold, it's not overworked or too realistic. The Githyanki was a new monster to those of us in the States. And it was different enough to inspire some curiosity as to what their story was. They kind of looked undead, but not really. And even though the mystery with them is long gone, this beautiful art lives on. The Keep on the Borderlands was an iconic module back in the day. It was packed into most of the Magenta Box basic sets, and was many a player's first window into the game that we all love. One of the many monsters you could run afoul of in that classic was this Minotaur, drawn by Bill Willingham. It was actually the second version, and in my opinion, superior, to appear in the adventure. Bill's piece came in a reprint during the game's 1981 boom. Now, I've always thought of this clean and menacing interpretation of the mythical monster that Theseus killed above all others. Larry Elmore did a fantastic cover for the Frank Mentzer reprint of the basic D&D set back in 1983. This piece shows a brave, or foolish, warrior facing off against an ancient dragon. This was the definitive look for a lot of latecomers to D&D, right after the initial boom of 1981. Larry Elmore is one of the best, and you can feel the savage power of the dragon and even the foolhardy courage of the warrior facing off against it. What many don't realize is that in his initial sketch, Elmore had 3 adventurers in the scene. But Gary Gygax wanted the scene to be a more personal one that would reach out and grab the viewer. I think either would have worked, but it's hard to fault the decision to go with this classic final version. Simply magnificent. Now, I'm actually going to include a couple of maps on my list, as back in the day, that's how I saw these things, as works of art themselves. And to me, the most memorable map back then was the one for Castle Ravenloft by David Sutherland III. It shows the castle of Strahd von Zarovich, D&D's version of Count Dracula. Adventure I-6 was a great one, spawning an entire setting for the game. And this beautiful 3D map, unlike anything that I had seen up to that point, helped visualize the twists and turns of the doomed Count's lair. You could almost feel the cobwebs and smell the decay the lower you went, in search of Strahd's coffin. There was so much that was iconic with the Tomb of Horrors adventure. The Death Trap dungeon was one that had a separate art booklet included to help DMs describe the rooms and objects which were probably just about to kill all the PCs. The best known of these is the ultimate glory hole, shown on the back cover of the adventure by the great Errol Otis. Thousands and thousands of DMs have shown their players this piece over the years, almost daring them to put something, anything, into that mysterious black mouth. Did anyone ever do that when you ran or played this adventure? Let me know in the comments below, won't you? I never read the Dragonlance novels, but way back I did run the first 4 Dragonlance adventures for my group. And I particularly loved this piece for the cover of the very first Dragonlance adventure, DL1, Dragons of Despair, by the great Clyde Caldwell. It captured the amazing sunken city of Zack Serdoth in the background, and showed the gang battling a villain which was, surprisingly, given the name of the game, absent in most early adventures. The Black Dragon is shown here in all of its horrible majesty. This piece is why, to this day, I actually prefer that type over all others. Colorful and beautiful, this is one of the great module covers of all time. Alright, this one's a little off the wall, but I always dug this entry by Jim Holloway in the Monster Manual 2. It's the Oinodaemon, Anthraxis. I kind of always thought this guy was a better Orcus than Orcus himself. You could almost feel the disease coming off of this loathsome and pretty powerful creature. It's weird how these daemons never really got the love that the devils and demons did, but there are some really, really great ones, and in my opinion, this is the best. Check them out, or give them another look if you ever get a chance. See if you can't find a way to squeeze one into your game. David Sutherland III's interpretation of the races available to play in the first edition Player's Handbook has always stuck with me. Is it his best work? No. But there's something about it that just works. Maybe it's just the beautiful simplicity of it. But whenever I see a similar picture in later editions of D&D or in other games, my mind always comes back to this one. Now this piece for the Fire Giant is classic Dave Trampier. He portrays the visceral strength of these alphas perfectly in one image. This piece not only appeared in the Monster Manual, but also in the legendary Against the Giants series, specifically the Hall of the Fire Giant King. That module series formed the first part of a mega adventure, which ended up in the lair of the Spider Queen Lolth herself, which actually takes us to our next entry. The Demon Web from Module Q1, Queen of the Demon Web Pits, got mixed reviews. Some said it was cool, others thought it was a bit of a disappointment to navigate, but I always thought just the map itself, again by David Sutherland III, who also wrote the adventure, was very eye-catching. I love the colors used to denote the different levels, and the symmetry showing the path the PCs would have to take to get to Lolth and put an end to her evil once and for all. Once you see this one, it's really hard to forget, especially if you have the physical copy. Everyone by now knows about the legendary banned edition of Deities and Demigods. The one that allegedly used the Melnibonian and Cthulhu mythos without permission. By the way, the recently deceased Jim Ward refuted that, saying that he personally got permission to use both of those properties, and TSR would have won any lawsuit were it brought against them. But TSR thought it would be easier just to remove them from future versions instead of getting involved in any kind of a court case. That, of course, made the early versions of the book collectibles. And in those 2 removed entries, the one that always stood out to me was the doomed Elric himself by Jeff D. I mean, what is more badass than the man who oversees the end of his world with the Sword of Swords, throwing up a set of devil horns? The Hidden Shrine of Tomoeshan is easily one of the best D&D adventures of all time, in my book. It's a better version of the Tomb of Horrors because, while it's challenging, it is survivable, and it's full of that great South American flavor. I've used it whole or in parts over the years in my campaign, and it never disappoints. The cover, by Errol Otis, captures the setting and feel of the adventure as only he can. Fans of my channel probably already know that this won't be Errol's last appearance on this list either. The Keep on the Borderlands made such an impact that it gets 2 entries on my list. Yes, I love not only the main cover, and especially the back cover, showing the fledgling party probably heading on their first adventure together, but it's this image inside of the mad hermit that you might encounter along the way to the Caves of Chaos that has really stuck with me over the years. Peeking out from his tree home, protected by an unseen mountain lion hiding in the branches above, he always seemed just as mysterious to me as those legendary caverns that lay beyond. What was his story? Who was he? Was he a former adventurer gone mad from what he'd seen? Limitless possibilities. Again, setting the tone for what the game could be at its very best. In the Celtic mythos section of Deities and Demigods, you'll find an entry for the mysterious Master of the Hunt. Any PCs who came across him could end up as the hunted themselves, or participating in the hunt, perhaps against their will. The Wild Hunt here, by Jim Rosloff, is note perfect. An almost flawless piece that draws you in right away as you watch the dreaded huntsman come right at you. Tucked at the back of the Monster Manual is a timeless piece by Dave Trampier, Treasure for the Survivors. You can almost feel the greed dripping off the faces of these 3 knaves as they're about to come to the end of their quest. How many of their comrades fell to get them here? At that moment, it doesn't really matter, does it? It's the ecstasy of gold, as Ennio Morricone put to music. If you've ever played D&D long enough, you can easily picture any of your characters as any of these 3. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't put a piece in by the legendary artist Darlene. The work of hers that always grabbed me is a bit atypical for her. I love the use of negative space to create a moody, evocative nighttime atmosphere. Who's in that boat? And who's on that horse? He's not human. Is it death himself come to claim a victim? Or a more earthly danger? This work is full of mystery and tension, and I simply love it. Let's face it, real men want to be Emirakal the Chaotic. In the first edition DM's Guide, Dave Trampier created the ultimate fantasy gangster. You can almost picture the wild-eyed dread of the people in this town when they hear that this bad boy is riding up to the city gates. They know he's come to settle a few scores and light some suckers up. He takes their rings, takes their Rolex, they look up at the brother and say, "Damn, what's next?" Once he mops the streets, I always pictured the terrified yet titillated women of that town coming out of the door frames and flocking to be the lucky ones to go back with him to the East Side Motel. When his job's done, he goes to his tower to study and prepare a little bit more, ready for the next time some busters need to be regulated. The cover to the first edition Player's Handbook, again by Dave Trampier, was a no-brainer to me, and probably you guys too. What else can you say? An adventuring party doing what adventuring parties should always be doing. Looting and planning their next bout of looting. With a side of murder hoboing along the way, no doubt. That statue is a fantastic focal point, too. I actually got my own miniature version of it. I loved it so much. At some point, every old school group has done or wants to recreate a version of this scene. In our campaign many years ago, Crazy Mouse, my co-host in a weekly live stream, The Lair, you can see that every Wednesday at 7 p.m., spearheaded Operation Mo Money, as he called it. The caper involved a statue that he could climb, just like this one. In our campaign only 2 weeks ago, the gang was prying the gems out of the couple of statues' eyes. It all gets traced back to this image. Let me know how this masterpiece bled into your worlds in the comments below, won't you? A Paladin in Hell by David Sutherland III is to me a tentpole of early D&D. Even us kids back then recognized its importance and beauty and talked about how freaking cool it was from concept to execution. The image inspired its own adventure later on. I was always confused during the Satanic Panic during the 1980s, as I would kind of silently point to works of art like this and say, mostly to myself, see? Our characters are the ones fighting against these demons and devils. Alas, didn't help. And even if your players love to tease the paladin in your group as being maybe a fussy Karen, everyone has mad respect for this particular holy warrior. He walks the walk by going down to hell, alone apparently, and putting his money where his mouth is. Perhaps it's because we also know he's probably doomed given his precipitous position and the evil reinforcements that are on their way. But that doesn't matter. This unknown knight will inspire warriors against evil for generations to come. The cover art for the Moldvay Magenta Box Basic Edition of D&D by the great Arrow Lotus is to me the quintessential piece of D&D art. It tells an instant story, the colors are vivid, and the scene is perfectly composed. If you had to choose a universal image of what old school D&D was at its best, this is the one. It's so good, a full-size mural version now decorates this studio, which is also fittingly our gaming room. I don't know if I could give a greater testament than that. Now, because you boys and girls have been so good, I'm actually going to give you a bonus entry. The first edition monster manual included many great monsters, but one that I and so many others were fascinated with the most was the devil himself, Asmodeus. He fit the image most of us had in our minds for the Prince of Darkness back then, and this piece is menacing, but also exudes a certain charisma. A shout out to the dungeon delver, Bill, who helped me confirm the artist of this piece as David Sutherland III. His clean style was perfect to bring to life the magnetic personality of the Dark One. Well, there you go. That's my list. I'm sure you're going to let me know if I missed any, those that appear on your list. Please feel free to do so, as I said before, in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you guys do have a great rest of your day, and remember to hit that like button so that YouTube will recommend this type of content more often. And also remember to subscribe if you like the cut of your boy's jib here. Until we talk again, goodbye.